Hey, this is Bill Cook, and we're really excited about our podcast today. Little piece of heaven down here, Junction T and 7, and we got some really neat things coming this year. And I got a couple of fellows I think you're going to really enjoy this podcast. So I got Mr. Gilkeson here and Mr. Yahnig, and we're going to be talking about something kind of cool and different. And I think maybe it's might be perking some of your interest. But just remember, stop by Ag City, Little Piece of Heaven, Junction T and 7, and visit one of our farms and one of the people that are down here in business with us. So let's just get started. Jeff, let's just start a little bit with you, and then we'll roll right in. Tell a little bit. You've been on a couple of podcasts. So
yeah, I have. I grew up just here down in the Harrisonville area, South Kansas City, about 35 miles. Been out in the country all my life. Been a livestock farmer, row crop, and Bill and I are kind of on a venture now. We're playing around with this hemp and seeing what it's going to do, and we're all about taking the soil and trying to get it restored back or in better health. You know, we've been dirtying it up for about 40, 50, 60 years now, and I think Bill and I and the agriculture is coming up with a way that we can get that cleaned up, slicked up, and something better to pass on for the future generations.
And Jeff has been really good about going out and finding markets. And of course, we're based on SOPs and ROIs. So the whole thing is about how we do our USDA research here. And we are a USDA research licensed location. For a long time, we were with universities. The last 2 years, we've been our own. And because we really focus on SOPs and ROIs. And so we want to really create value here. And of course, Jeff has kind of come on board, and we have a little bit of the same philosophy on how to make a better life in rural America. And my next guest is Mr. Gilkeson here, Seth Gilkeson. And kind of the way we got started on this, he shared some information with my son, and my son said, "You ought to read this." And I've known Seth all his life, and it was really good document, Seth. Really got me thinking about another thing that we could research and another way we could help our farmers and help our soil and help the lifestyle that we've kind of went away from.
Yes, so I wrote this document because I felt like I needed to put down kind of all the things that's been bouncing around in my head, and it's sometimes hard for me to communicate well unless I write it down. And so through this process of writing things down and thinking back to my childhood, I grew up on a farm. We had row crops, we had cattle, we had pigs. But the whole system of farming was very hard, and it ended up that we did not succeed. And so it really was hard for me to get away from farming, going broke at an early age, honestly, and not being able to do what I enjoyed doing, and trying then, when I got away from it, to have some time to think about it and be away so that I could actually look at it in a rational perspective. And so through this process and a lot of prayer, I realized that one of the things that I didn't know anything about was trees, and that maybe there was an avenue through trees that I had never researched, had never thought about. And so that's kind of where we met, and we were talking about, the possibilities.
Well, and again, Seth, you've been, you and my youngest son, Mike, are about the same age, pretty close. And so he's been involved in agriculture like yourself all your life, but he's been more in the processing and other things. And he was very intrigued with your piece of work. And normally I don't read stuff, but when I started reading your story, because I've known you and your family from the time that you started, and it was very eye-opening when you were talking about the trees, and we went back into the Adam and Eve, in the beginning stages, and I know that you're you have a strong belief system, and one of the things that we always fight for, Jeff and I talk about this all the time, is ethics and morals. And we were taught, I was not a very smart person growing up, so I didn't get all the smarts, but I learned one thing: hard work, clean living. Work hard, have good ethics, good morals, and work hard, and you can pick the rest of the stuff up as you go along the way. But I was so excited to hear some of your stuff and some of the things that you were doing. It was very eye-opening. Yeah.
We had the opportunity here, Bill. Seth and I was just visiting right before you sat down, and talking about trees and talking about the chestnut and the white oak acorns. And I was talking to Seth about a place that I knew where you could still see the places in the limestone that had been hollowed out, and the stone was still set next to it where they were grinding white oak acorns. And I said, the trees that were still there were probably 200 years old. And he pulled out his phone and shows me a massive white oak that he said, that tree's 400 years old, and it was 2 miles from where I grew up at. And I didn't know that tree was there. You'd think if there was a 400-year-old tree in the neighborhood that's about 7 foot across at the base, you'd know about it. I wouldn't have known that if he hadn't showed me that picture and then told me whose farm it was. I thought, oh my gosh. That's the thing that we have. The history to the ground that he's talking about is the north side of the Amaruges. And I know I talked to a man that when I was probably 8 or 9 years old out in that area, his granddad used to play in the fish camp where they came up, which is out there on the Grand River, which is just right up the hill from where he showed me this tree. And it's amazing that we have history right here in Cass County. Here's a tree that was a fairly good sized tree when they were still catching fish for summer camp out in the place that they're planting soybeans in now. There's no creeks out there.
Well, how long have you been in this? How long have you been in agriculture, Jeff? How long have you been? What's your history in agriculture here? How long have you been here?
I was getting chicken manure in my toes when I had diapers on. So, and then I think it goes back at least to my grandfathers, and I think their fathers too.
So
we've been in.
Your family has been in rural America and in this area for generations.
My granddads came from one from Pennsylvania, one from Kentucky,
Right.
and then they moved here to the Midwest.
Yeah.
And yes, but when they were out there too, they were in agriculture.
And I know Seth, your family, you run deep. Your roots are deep. I know your granddad George Gilkeson.
All 4 sets of my grandparents' families have been here since the Civil War before. So my family's been here for a very long time.
So you're not only have you seen in your own life, and you've seen your own life, but you've listened to the stories and some of the things, and they probably have started making more sense to you in the last few years than even in those early days.
Oh yeah. I remember my grandfather talking about using teams of horses and going how many teams of horses he would have to work a field for a day, and then picking the corn by hand and throwing it in the wagons and shoveling it all by hand, and then how much that has changed for all of us to now. And that's been a lot of change really fast, and I think that people have kind of got lost. I think that the way things have changed so quickly that things maybe have gotten tossed away or thrown away that shouldn't have. Ideas that were important for the stability of families and people just kind of got trampled and left behind in the dust. And so there's a whole lot to trees in the fact that they create an incredible stability. And that's one of the things that I wrote about, was that it takes time, but when you establish a tree-based agricultural system, then it is something that you don't have to have heavy tillage for every year. You don't have to till the soil and plant. And one of the big problems with keeping soil health is the fact that if you till the soil, you're killing all the microbes that you want to be there to provide all the dense nutrients to the plants for health in the crops. And we have had all the focus, or most of the focus, on 3 crops, when there are trees that can do things that you cannot even imagine a tree has the capacity to do, because it hasn't even been tapped. It's barely been scratched. And so,
well, I tell you what, we're going to have a short break, and this is so exciting. I think the second half is going to be even more exciting than just the introduction here. But we'll be right back. Well, this is Bill Cook, and I just want a short commercial here. I'll tell you a little bit about Ag City, a little piece of heaven down here, Junction 10 and 7. And we're getting so many good calls. We're going to be up to about 25 or 30 businesses going into this next year. All kinds of people on 7 Highway that can provide you with opportunities to look at rural America, look at rural lifestyles and see how we live. And it's just so exciting to have these 2 gentlemen with us today. They've really brought some different thoughts to the table, but we just want to be sure that you come down and take a little piece of heaven on Junction 10 and 7. Look at our rural communities, look at the Still Meadows and the Yahnig farms and all the different Kurzweil meats, all the people that have been here for generations, providing food and providing entertainment, providing a lifestyle for everybody to enjoy. And if you have a little opportunity, stop by. We're going to open our Visitors Bureau this summer, and stop by. You'll get a lot of information here at Ag City, the Ag City Visitors Bureau right here on 7 Highway, about 4 miles from Harrisonville and about 30 miles or so from Clinton, Missouri. The Ozark capital, that's kind of where you start in the Ozarks. On your way down the lake, stop by and visit somebody along 7 Highway, and more than likely they're going to be part of Ag City. So thank you very much, and we're going to get right back to Jeff and to Seth. They're so interesting, and they got a great story. Well, welcome back and to our little podcast, a little piece of heaven down here, Junction 7, Ag City, and 2 great guests today. We had a lot of discussion over break here, and so we're going to just kind of wet your whistle a little bit more on things you might look at, things you might do, trees you might pick, systems you might want to do. And so I'm going to start back with Jeff just a little bit. And of course, Jeff and I are working with this USDA research license, and we're working with not only the hemp, but we are planting other crops and other things that we would see that would be beneficial to better soil, better quality life, better things, better lifestyle with certain crops. And that's what kind of brought us into our discussion with Mr. Gilkeson. So you've been batting around here. I couldn't get you quit talking over that break. You just these guys are like a bunch of chipmunks here.
Yeah. We're getting ready to hear some pretty neat information. And not the spoiler alert, one of them is he's going to talk about the honey locust, and that was a hard sell for me. And then he told me there's no reason for it to be a hard sell, and I'm not going to spoil that. I'm going to let him tell you, but I'm excited to hear more about the honey locust that he's going to talk to you about.
So do you see anything in the research on USDA that would? So one of the things about USDA research, and we did find out that Missouri was one of the top forestry trees, and there's a lot of data. And you dropped a couple of names. I want you to bring those back. And I know some of these people will know some of these names because they're out there, and some of them have been in the organic business. And so there's some things that you mentioned earlier about certain people, if we'd heard of them. And so those are things that you can research too. So one of the things we want to do as USDA, and we have a carte blanche opportunity to affect a lot of the things that USDA takes from our research. So we can help them as much as they can help us. So Seth, take it away, buddy.
So first thing I want to talk about is 5 different trees that you could say they have a lot of power, they have a lot of ability to make change. So the first one, which most people are gonna not believe, but it's the honey locust tree. The nutrient profile of the pods of that tree is equal to corn. The tree is a nitrogen fixer. It is native to the central area of the United States. It can grow anywhere from a little north of here all the way down to Louisiana, and it's very, very adaptable, very, very drought tolerant. And I got a hold of a select seed, which was produced by John Hershey many, many years ago, and he had developed a tree that has no thorns or very low thorns with very big pods. The pods on these trees will be like this big and about 2 inches thick when they're finally developed. There were honey locust trees of that variety that would produce up to 400 pounds of pods per tree. You do the math on that, you have 30 trees per acre with 400 pounds of pods, and you got 12,000 pounds. So you're competing right up there with a corn crop. Matter of fact, there was some research done in the 50s or 60s on that, and it kind of disappeared, unfortunately. But
Wonder why.
yeah, wonder why. So then another couple trees is the chestnut tree. Most people who are familiar with the chestnut tree know that there was a blight that happened, I think it was in the 30s or 40s.
Right, a lot of them died.
Where almost all of them died.
Right.
But they've been working really hard to bring back. They use Chinese chestnuts and crosses with American chestnut to develop, and have been working on that. Those chestnuts are very, very healthy as far as nutrition wise. They can be ground up and made into a flour, very high calorie. Used to be, back in the day, they would fatten out their pigs on chestnuts and not on corn, because corn was just too expensive for the pioneers and too hard for them to break into the ground. But you have a tree that's 100 years old and producing a crop every year of chestnuts, then that makes life a lot easier. And you can eat them yourself, and the pigs can eat them, or other animals can eat them. So that's 2. 3 is the hazelnut tree. The nuts of the hazelnut they're an understory tree, so you can plant them around and underneath, let's say the honey locust or the chestnut trees, and they will do well in half shade, half sunlight. And their seed is very high in oil, so they're kind of the replacement for the soy oil. And the oil from them is a very high quality. It would be equal or close to olive oil. And then I didn't say this about the chestnut tree, but it's like a replacement, or could be a replacement for wheat. So if you could ever imagine all the fields around here being full of three trees, instead of the agriculture system we have now, we would get away from herbicides, we would get away from a lot of the chemical fertilizers, we would get away from having to have planting every year, the fuel costs, you'd get away from the big combines and the big, tractors. You'd still have tractors, you'd still need to, manage. But then once those trees are established, you can have animals underneath the trees, and so you get double, triple cropping from that, plus other crops, because the trees would have lumber. I mean, it's never ending, the possibilities literally of how things could change if you started now, what it would look 30, 40, 50 years from now, be completely different, and it would be very, very sustainable, very healthy. Another tree is the mulberry tree. It's like one of the most highest protein in a fruit that you can get. The leaves of the mulberry tree is what they use to feed silkworms. It's been worked with for thousands of years in China, and the leaves of that tree is more nutritious than alfalfa. So there are places where they have developed how they can just harvest the leaves off the tree and get just as many tons per acre as you would off of an alfalfa crop, and it's better than alfalfa.
Wow. Then you have one more.
let's see.
What's that one that we
Oh,
talked about?
walnut tree. I really like the walnut tree because it can be your own 401k. You can plant, 200 walnut trees to the acre. You can get the walnut crop after 10 years, 12 years, and so they'll produce 4,000 or 5,000 pounds to the acre of walnuts. That you crack them yourself and sell them. You got several $1,000s, $4,000 or $5,000 if you market it yourself. Plus, then in 30 years, if you need cash, most people are dependent on 401ks. But then you have the problem of, well, what if something happens to my 401k? Well, you got a 401k out in your field. You can cut those trees down. You can get $500 to $1,000 a log. You can log half of them and you get 200 grand off of 1 acre, and then you still got enough walnut trees that they'll grow and fill in the areas of the other trees and still keep getting your crop.
So there was one tree that we talked about that we didn't know whether it was in, and it was like something that you could plant. And a lot of this is it's going to take some time. You're going to plant some trees. It's going to take some time to mature. When you're talking about so many years. So a lot of times, short-term farming. The old grandpa is not going to be around to see that, but the next generation. So there's a lot of good things here, generational wise. But you were talking about one that was from 4 to 6 months, and then trying to plant that. And I'm trying to remember the name of that tree.
So it's a moringa. Moringa tree.
Moringa.
Yeah, it's not native to the United States, but neither is soybeans, and neither is wheat. So the moringa tree is the most nutritious plant known to man. The leaves of the tree are almost complete human nutrition. It's been used in Africa to keep kids from starving to death. It'll grow in incredibly drought areas. It grows incredibly fast. There is a select variety that I'm trying to get a hold of that you plant a seed, and in 4 to 6 months, the tree will start producing seeds. And the seeds of that tree, when you press it out, it'll produce oil equal to olive oil. And if I had fresh moringa leaves right now here in the Midwest, I could sell them for $20 a pound, because you could put them right in your salads, you could put them right in your soups, and you can make sure you're not missing any nutrients.
So a moringa tree, how many pounds would grow per acre?
Well, if you're talking about leaf yield, I'm sure you could get 4 to 5 tons of leaf, no problem, an acre.
4 to 5 tons at $20 a pound, that's a big number.
Yeah.
Well, the thing you do have there, what little I read on them too, you can also put them like your tree that you have right here behind you, Bill.
Sure.
And you can plant them and then push them out in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
I think they can go down as at 18 or 20 degrees is what they can handle. But you could have a couple of dozen trees, bushes that you're keeping inside or enclosed with that kind of potential, because they are giving you something not only with the leaf but the fruit that's coming off of that. That's what we're finding in a lot of the trees that I've been looking at since you said Seth was coming in to talk us about. It's not just something that you're getting a fruit or nut off of. The leaves are very nutritional.
Sure.
And of all things, the honey locust. And let's face it, we've all watched deer and cattle. If you've got cattle, you see them go to those honey locusts when those pods start dropping off. And there's a reason. And I don't know if you know off the top of your head what the sugar content, the protein content, the fiber, but it's right up there. Study your honey locust. That's the biggest takeaway that I got out of what we're doing here today, when Bill told me who we had coming in, and I started studying that. And a tree that I've been trying to clear off of every one of my farms. Now keep in mind, he's not talking about that nasty, thorny honey locust you got out there. He's talking about breeding the thorns off. And
Now,
Seth made the comment a while ago. He said most of our orchards, our fruit trees, were originally thorn trees, and it's been bred out of them. He's talking about planting honey locusts that doesn't have thorns on them, and he just told me if they have 1 or 2 thorns on them, they come out of this program. That's impressive.
now I want to, as we close this now, I want to capture your attention, because what I'd like to do In a month or two, I'd like to have this group back together, talking a little bit about trees and what we're doing. I know that we found some honey locusts out last Saturday, and they're here on our farm.
Yep.
And
they're thornless.
And they're thornless.
And they're producers.
And they're producing. So you might have some value out there in your farms that you don't even know you've got, and you might want to think about how you cultivate that, and you might want to think about how to put a nice little honey locust group together selling honey locust products.
Well, we've all seen beautiful guitars, and if you roll one over and think, what is that wood on the back of that guitar? It's quarter cut honey locust, and it's what they make really good guitars out of.
Yeah,
acoustical.
Well, one thing I will say here is, like, you guys found honey locusts growing on your farms. Do you ever find wild wheat or wild soybeans or wild corn growing on your farms? No. Trees are much more durable and powerful, and they are the future as far as I'm concerned.
Well, fortunately I had about 4 years working with some folks and with winter nurseries, and I went to where soybeans were discovered 10,000 years ago, which is just northern Vietnam and the edge of China, and about 6,000 feet above sea level, and they were creeping vines. And so if you look at what we've done, and we can control soybeans, we got the soybean organizations, and we got the checkoff, and we got there's certain commodities are controlled that we control. Now, what I would like to do on our next session, I would like to come back and we had a whole discussion about the beginning of trees and the Adam and Eve story and the biblical principles. Now, we aren't even touched base on that. But I'd like to get back in a month or so and have a discussion on why we're in the grains and why maybe we've had a little bit some things happen that we were cast upon because of kind of like the Adam and Eve thing went kind of sour on us. And so I would like to touch base on that, not to get overboard on it, but it has a lot of value that we haven't discussed. And what it has value is it has value with what we talked about: ethics, morals, hard work, doing the right thing. And we ventured away from that a little bit because and I don't want to call it corporate greed. It's the best word I can think of. So we just say, the free enterprise system is not necessarily designed, hasn't been designed for the middle class or the farmer to come up and have the original dream that we were hoping to have when we first started in agriculture. And I remember when we first started in agriculture. And I remember when we didn't have soybeans. I remember riding in on the horses. And I remember the outside toilet being dug. Or no, the inside toilet being dug. So anyway, without getting into more of this stuff, and we're going to close this session, and we're going to thank you for joining us. It's been a real pleasure, Seth and Jeff, to have this discussion. And if you like what we're talking about, you might send a message in and let us know, and we'll get back and further this conversation. Thank you, man.
Been good.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You all have a good day.